Hello my friends and welcome back to another episode of Chess with Konstantin. Today we are covering some opening traps in the exchange variation French. The French defense, of course, is known as a very strong counter-attacking opening as black. And to help us demonstrate this particular opening, we have Nashmadinov playing with the white pieces, and an opponent with the same name as me, Konstantinov, is playing with the black pieces. This was played in Rostov in 1936. The game began with pawn to e4, and then now we have the standard French setup with e6, d4, and d5. Now white has a decision to make, whether he wants to capture this pawn or to advance to e5. I personally like the variations that arise from e takes d5, and after e takes d5 then go for the reti with g3, and after moves like knight f6 it's really you don't get any advantages white, but also it's very easy to play. You just play natural moves like bishop g2, knight to e2 and castle. The king is very safe, and the position is quite symmetrical, so neither side has a clear advantage, but there are rich attacking chances for both sides. For example, here white can choose to sacrifice the pawn with pawn to c4, and then play knight to c3 or knight to d2. The bishop can be developed either on e3 or on b2. And really there are plenty of possibilities and different strategies you can try. And as I said, there are rich chances for both sides. Also, this is a very good opening to play if you don't know how to play against the French. But if you are an enthusiast of French theory, then after d4 and d5, you can choose to advance the pawn here with e5. And this is fine too, as is what happened in the game. So this is called the advance variation. And here black's plan will typically be to organize an attack on the queen side. So we will see moves like pawn to c5, knight to c6, and this knight will sometimes play to e7, and sometimes you will have moves like pawn to f6, attacking the center. This is a very common theme. And the queen will come out to b6, applying additional pressure on this central pawn and also on the b2 pawn. So if white is not careful in this advance variation, then black can gain a very powerful attack. But let's see what happened in the game. So after e5, we have an immediate c5 from Konstantinov. And rather than trying to hold on to this pawn with, for example, pawn to c3, knight c6, knight f3, defending the pawn, queen to b6 and a3 with the idea to push b4, rather than go through this variation, white decided that's too much work to calculate through all that stuff and just took this pawn. Now here, if your opponent is really good and really knows what they're doing, then after you play d takes c5, they will play knight to d7. This is actually the strongest continuation. This knight can choose to capture on c5 and will be quite strong. The knight can also capture on e5 if the occasion calls for it. So actually knight to d7 is the strongest move. Okay, but in the game we have the simple bishop takes c5 instead. And we continued bishop to d3, a natural developing move. Knight to c6, attacking the pawn. Queen to e2, defending the pawn. Queen to c7, double attack on the e5 pawn. Knight to f3 with the development and defense. And now black made a mistake. The strongest move here to continue would be pawn to f6, as I mentioned, this is a common theme. The threat is simply to capture in the center, and if white plays e takes f6, then you get to develop your knight with tempo. So this is actually the strongest variation for black. Okay, but black apparently didn't know this. So rather than playing f6, black decided to go for knight d4. Now seemingly this makes sense because you're threatening to remove this defender, and after knight takes d4 and bishop takes d4, this pawn is under double attack. So white defending the pawn with f4, and this is one of the only moves that can actually hold on to material here. Black continued with knight to e7 with the idea to position the knight to either c6 or f5 and castle. And now white plays a very good move that is probably theoretically the best move here, despite what the engine may or may not say. And the move here is knight to a3. This is an excellent move with very deep positional implications. This is a very good move, not only because of the trap you're about to see, but also of the obvious threats and possibilities that it provides. So first of all, we have an obvious threat of knight to b5, forking the queen and the bishop. This would be a very strong attacking move. The knight would also be looking at this very powerful potential outpost at d6. So, you know, knight to b5 is a devastating threat. But also, as what happened in the game, if black plays a6, then you have the move pawn to c3, repositioning the knight potentially to d4 with a very good game. Now I will note here black played a6, but the question becomes, you know, if you see the tactic, why not play, for example, bishop c3 check, with the idea that, okay, you are checking white's king, and if, for example, b takes c3, then queen can capture here. Well, the idea is that actually white has the move queen to d2, and after taking here on a1, then we have pawn to c3, and the queen will be trapped. So the ideas now will be bishop to b1 followed by bishop to b2. So the only move here is d4, but c takes d4, and after knight to f5 with the double attack on the d4 pawn, we have knight to b5, threatening this fork and defending the pawn. And after castle and castle, a6, we have simply knight to c3, and the queen is now completely trapped and will be captured in the next move. For example, if knight takes d4, bishop a3, attacking the rook and also the queen. So the queen is now trapped, and after this, actually it is white that is better in this position. So just so you know, if black does play bishop to c3 here, then the queen will be captured after this sequence. Just so you know. But in the game this didn't happen. We had pawn to a6, and now white continued with the plan to play pawn to c3, attacking the bishop, and something quite similar occurred in the game. So we have bishop takes c3 check, b takes c3, queen takes c3 check, queen d2, and queen takes a1. Now you can take a look at this video, maybe even press pause, and can you find the one move Nashmadinov played here that immediately made his opponent resign the game? I'll give you a few seconds. So in this position, Nashmadinov played bishop to b1, and immediately his opponent resigned the game. That is because the queen is completely trapped, all these squares are covered, and the bishop, of course, is defended by the knight that was cleverly placed on a3. So in the next move, white will play bishop to b2 and capture the queen for a minor piece. This is yet another example of why you shouldn't move the queen out early and engage in these adventurous aventures where you're trying to capture seemingly free material that's not actually free. You will find that this is a recurring theme in a lot of openings, and French defense is certainly one of them. I hope you enjoyed this very nice, very short game by Neshmadinov, and I hope you've learned something about the French defense. I will see you next time. Konstantin out.